guys, my name is Brooklyn and this is my daughter Eden. She is almost 8 months old and today I'm going to be sharing my birth story. It's a little overdue seeing as she's 8 months old, but I'm excited to share with you. Okay, so I am very unscripted right now. I have no notes. I'm just totally going from memory, so we'll see how this goes. Let's see, I was induced, I went to my 40-week appointment. It was like one day after I was 40 weeks, and by that time, I was just so ready and so anxious to see Eden that we decided to go ahead and call the hospital and schedule a day to be induced. And so my doctor, who is amazing, I have so much respect and love for him, he called the hospital. Uh-oh, she dropped her book. And they had an opening on Tuesday, which was, let's see, that was the next day. And so it all happened really fast. I worked up until the day that I was induced, and I think that that was really good for me because it helped to distract me. I would get really anxious throughout my pregnancy whenever I was thinking of labor and the hospital and the whole process. So I just tried to distract myself constantly. And so I was like super productive my last week of pregnancy because I was just like, okay, just keep thinking of work, work, work. Side note, I am the worst whenever it comes to anything medical. For example, even after having her, she was about 2 months old, and I went to go get my flu shot and passed out on the way home. So maybe that gives you an idea of how bad I am with anything medical. And so delivering a child was a really big mental game. In some ways, the way that I prepared was not preparing. I didn't go into any of those childbirth classes or breastfeeding classes. I wouldn't let my doctor share with me what to expect. I didn't ask for friends to share what their experience was because I was just terrified. I was so scared of the whole process. And so that is actually motivating me right now to share this story because I'm sure that there are women out there who are scared of the process and being fearful myself, but being on the other side of it, I want to offer you guys hope and encouragement to know that you can make it through and just to share kind of what my experiences were. I was induced with Eden. I went into the hospital on a Tuesday afternoon, and I think they checked me in around 4 p.m. And they brought me back and hooked me up to an IV, which was really scary for me because I'm a big baby. And then, oh gosh, I don't even know the name of how they started the induction. So they started the induction process by inserting something. I guess I should know the details before I start talking. But all of that started around 5 p.m. and I was hooked up to like a fetal monitor so I could hear Eden's heartbeat, and I had this thing hooked up to me that took my blood pressure like every 30 minutes, maybe every 15 minutes. Being checked into my room, getting my IV, it just all of a sudden started to feel real. Especially being able to hear her heartbeat, it was just kind of an overwhelming feeling. And so that first night in the hospital, I had contractions throughout the whole night, but I never felt anything really. And so they were hoping that I might go into labor that night, but I didn't. And so my doctor came the next morning, Wednesday morning. He came in around 7 a.m. and checked me, and I was still at a 1. So I hadn't made any progress through the night. And that was kind of emotional because I was thinking, I've already been here, I don't know, by then I've already been there 12 hours and no progress. But I try to stay optimistic And whenever he came in at 7, he broke my water and said, hopefully things will pick up pretty soon. And, you know, Pitocin was going strong. So from that morning, 7 to about noon, is whenever I really started to get strong contractions. And they got pretty close. Like, I was having one every minute. And so the doctors came in and backed me off of some of the Pitocin. To give you a gauge of what to expect pain-wise with contractions, every time the nurses would come in, they would have me rank on a scale of 0 to 10 where my pain was at. And in my mind, so I've had 2 kidney stones and they were super painful. And so in my mind, I was like, okay, if a kidney stone's a 10, I'm gonna, like, every time they come in, I'm just gonna compare it to a kidney stone. And all throughout my pregnancy, the highest I got was a 4. So I was never crying with pain. I never felt overwhelmed with pain. It was just more of a discomfort. But the nice thing about contractions is I could watch on the monitor, I would watch it go up, watch it come down, and then I knew that I had at least a minute to like rest or get a break. And so yes, they were painful in a sense, but mentally it wasn't too hard, just because I knew that I would get a break after each one. So from 7 a.m. to noon, I really felt like I was making progress. Like, I was going through the contractions, I was finding my groove. And something else is that Eden was turned sunny side, so she was backwards. And so through all my contractions, the nurses had me like shifting positions, trying different things, trying to flip her head around. So I actually found that laying down and having the contractions was really hard because all I could focus on was the contraction. But I found that standing up or bouncing on the ball or walking around or leaning on something, just switching it up really helped, because it helped to take my mind off of the fact that, you know, my body was preparing for labor and all of that. So the contractions, they came and they went. I didn't experience anything, you know, like crazy pain. There was no screaming throughout any of the process. And my intention going in was, if I could do it without drugs, that's the route that I wanted to go, because I'm terrified of needles. So it wasn't like I want to deliver a baby all natural power. It was more of out of fear of needles and fear of an epidural. But I really think my doctor had a sense for my worries. He knows me really well, and so he came in at noon and he checked me, and I had still made no progress. So I was still at a 1, and he, you know, really gently told me that he thought that I should get an epidural. And so I trusted him. You know, in some ways I felt defeat, but at the same time, I know that he would do the best thing for me. And so I decided, okay, I'm gonna get the epidural. And pretty soon thereafter, in the early afternoon, the anesthesiologist came in for the epidural, and I was terrified. Like, that was probably the scariest thing, just because needles are hard, and it's really hard to sit still whenever you're having contractions, because they have you like lean over. I think I was hugging something, but I had to lean over and be super still, because it's very important. And I couldn't do it. I was like having contractions, I was nervous, I was like, I can't sit still, this is not gonna work. And so I asked if they had any drugs or anything that could calm me down, and they definitely do. So they gave me a shot of something, and I started feeling really good. And so then I asked for another shot, and so they gave me another one. And that really, I don't know what it was, but it really helped me to calm and relax. And then, you know, I was like, yeah, give me the epidural, sounds great, I can lean over, no big deal. So, I mean, the epidural was great. After I got it, it was a weird feeling, like not having control of my legs, but still being able to feel pressure. So I never felt pain, but I could feel my legs moving, and I could feel things happening, but it wasn't painful. And at my hospital, I had a little button that I could press, and it would dispense more of the epidural medication. There's probably some name for it, but it would dispense more of that pain-killing medication. And so if I ever thought that I started, like if I ever felt any pain, I would just press the button. And so I think I probably pressed it too many times because I was scared. In a way, it made me feel like I had control over what was going on, but really, they probably cut off the line. Like it was probably just a mental thing. But that was fun that I got to press that throughout the process. So I got my epidural in the early afternoon, and keep in mind, like by this time, by the afternoon, I had already been in the hospital induced for 24 hours. So my doctor was checking on me periodically throughout the afternoon, and every time, you know, it was a 1, I'm at a 1, I'm at a 1, I'm not progressing. And that was really hard because I was terrified of having a C-section. It just felt like I had no control over the situation. Like my body wasn't responding, and that was frustrating. And so at 5 p.m., my doctor came in. He checked me, and I started crying. I knew that I hadn't progressed, and sure enough, I was still at a 1. And you know, he brought up the C-section route. I think with Pitocin, you can only be on it so long before it's like, you're probably not gonna progress. So he brought up the C-section conversation, and I just burst into tears. I mean, I'm emotional, it's been a long day. I asked my doctor, what are the chances that I would progress sometime in the future? And he said, well, not a 0% chance. And so my response was like, all right, I'm gonna hold on, give me like a couple more hours, and I'm just gonna wait here, but I wanna know that I gave everything. And that's just my personality. I'm like scared of a C-section, so I wanted to make sure that I prolonged it as long as I could. The doctor agreed, thankfully. He left, and I remember just laying there. It was the first time that I really felt out of control, but felt peace about it. There came a point where I felt God's peace come over me, and I just knew that I wanted whatever was best for my baby. If they had to cut her out of me, that was fine. Just whatever is the safest for her, that's what I wanted. And so I just lifted my worries and my fears to God, had faith and trust that he was in control, and sooner or later that evening I was gonna have a baby one way or the other, and God was in control. And so there really just came a moment of presenting my worries and fears before God. I mean, there's no way to know, but I really feel like that process of letting go of control, my body and my mind were finally able to relax. I had been so tense ever since I arrived in the hospital, just so worried. But whenever I was able to relax, I finally felt my body progressing. I didn't want to get my hopes up, but even with the epidural, I could feel my body progressing. My doctor came back at 7, which was 2 hours later, and that was like the final chance. If I hadn't progressed dramatically, they were gonna cart me back and do a C-section. And so he walked in, I just burst out into tears. I was like, I don't wanna know. I don't wanna know. I'm just scared, you know. Every time he came in, I burst into tears. So he came in and he checked me, and he told me that I was at an 8. And at that point, I was just like happy sobbing, so excited. And things progressed, I mean, relatively fast. The nurse came in, and the nurse basically delivered Eden. So the nurse came in, and you know, she was the one that was having me push and was telling me what was going on. The push part was like nothing like the movies, and it's because I had an epidural. But I remember Aaron was like standing next to me, and I remember turning to him as I was pushing, and I was like, I feel like I should be screaming or something. Like, I feel like this should be hard, but I feel nothing. I feel great. This is wonderful. So even when I pushed, it was like, I don't really know if I'm pushing because I can't feel that much. So she was delivered at 8:10 p.m. And everything, it was just like, it's crazy. It was a blur, but at the same time, it was so vivid in my mind. I will never forget the doctor, like after she came out and hearing her cry, and the doctor like lifted her up, and she was upside down, and the umbilical cord was attached to her, and it was like one of those Lion King moments where it felt like he was lifting up Simba, but Simba was my baby. And I remember thinking like it was an out-of-body experience. It was so surreal and so weird that that was my baby, and I just delivered a baby, and I don't know, it was just an overwhelmingly joyful experience, and to see how faithful God was through the process and how healthy Eden was. I mean, that was my first concern after she was delivered. I was like, how's she doing? How's she doing? Like, does everything look okay? I just wanted to make sure that my baby was okay. But she, I mean, no complications at all. Praise the Lord. She was so healthy. They brought her to me, and I hadn't even thought of like, how am I gonna feed this baby? But they like placed her on me, and she nursed, and that was just a sweet bonding moment that I hadn't really prepared myself for. After that, they carted me back, and we were able to spend the night with her. And so I'm really glad that our hospital does that. As I think she only left our room once for a hearing check, but other than that, like, the pediatrician came to our room, and they did all of her blood tests in our room. And so it was really nice being able to spend that first night with her. So I'm sure that I left some stuff out, but I just wanted to sit in front of a video camera and document this, because I know in 5 years from now, if I don't record this story, I'm gonna look back and regret it. I feel like whenever I think of the whole birth story, I just can't help but reflect on how faithful God was through the whole process, and how if I can birth a child, so can you. This is not my comfort zone. Anything medical is not my comfort zone, but having her in the flesh, like, I would do it again in a heartbeat to be able to experience the joy of having a child again. And so we joked on the way home from the hospital, Aaron and I were like, all right, when are we gonna have another one? Because, you know, immediately after they're born, you forget all the details of the birth story, because, you know, it's not what matters. What matters is that they're here and that they're healthy. And so we're just so thankful for the blessing that God has given us. Thank you for watching, and we hope that you enjoyed this video. Say kisses. Eden, can you give kisses?